Democratic vice presidential candidate Kamala Harris promised this week that she and Joe Biden will be progressive on police reform if elected. In an interview on Sunday, Harris said everybody needs to be held accountable, even those who wear badges. Harris also called for nationwide standards on the use of force and an end to jailing drug offenders. And a 90-year-old statue of the Sacred Heart of Jesus was destroyed at a cathedral in Texas this week. A vandal knocked over the historic statue at St. Patrick's Cathedral in El Paso on Tuesday. Bishop Mark Seitz lamented the act, saying the person who carried out the assault must have been greatly disturbed to have attacked this peaceful place in our city and this image of the Prince of Peace. This continues an alarming trend of attacks on religious icons across the country. Also this week, a man was caught on surveillance video knocking over a statue of the Virgin of Guadalupe outside the Shrine Church of Our Lady of Solace in Brooklyn. The shrine needs to raise at least $4,000 for repairs. Unbelievable what's happening there. This past weekend, a gunman ambushed two Los Angeles County deputies outside of a metro station in downtown L.A. Now, surveillance video shows the suspect walking up to their cruiser and opening fire. Following the shooting, BLM protesters mocked the police and blocked the emergency exit and entrance to the hospital where the deputies were recovering. Joining me to discuss the deadly direction of these protests, particularly for law enforcement, we're joined by retired NYPD Police Commissioner Bernie Kerik. Thank you for being here, Bernie. Following the shooting of these police officers, people in the community mocked the wounded cops in a video posted on social media, and BLM protesters blocked the hospital emergency entrance. Listen to this.
They just got aired out. Somebody ran up on the car and bust on their right through the window, in the face and all.
I hope they die.
Bernie, what does this tell you about the state of America right now and the respect for our law enforcement officials?
Well, listen, guys like that found it entertaining that two cops were there was just an attempted assassination. These are the kinds of guys that are in communities that go out there, get involved in violence against cops, support the violence against cops, and they're following the lead of the Democratic Party. Look at what's happening in all of these cities like Atlanta, Chicago, Baltimore, Minneapolis. Minneapolis right now, they're basically under siege by guys like that, and they're under siege because they've diminished the cops, degraded the cops so bad, villainized the cops so bad, and defunded the cops and voted for defunding the cops. So that's the state of in general, in these cities run by Democrats, and LA is an example of it.
How much of this behavior, and we're seeing it being displayed toward officers across the country, how much of this behavior is being fueled by the BLM movement and the ongoing protests we're seeing across the country?
You know what, Raymond? It's a good question, and I would say the majority of this ideology, this hate for cops, the majority of it is coming from Black Lives Matter. Keep in mind, they're a Marxist group that despises the American government, despises cops. They've called for the attacks on cops. They've called for the killings of cops. They're no different than the Black Liberation Army, the Black Panther Party, and the Weather Underground back in the 70s and 80s that were responsible for over probably around 24 cops between 1970 and 1981. It's the same ideology, same mentality. They are perpetrating this ideology of hate and pushing it into the communities. And you have political leaders out there like mayors, governors, and city council members that are going along with it.
Bernie, I've spoke to some black officers this week here in New Orleans, and I want your input on this. I'm sure you talk to black or minority officers as well. It has to be doubly hard for them with this toxic approach and reaction to law enforcement for them to operate and work in their own communities? What are you hearing? It's, as I said, it must make the job doubly difficult for them, certainly the men I talk to.
It does, because these radical leftists, these militant Marxists that are out there promoting the Black Lives Matter ideology, they see them as traitors. So they target them probably more than the other cops. And the bottom line is, you know, it's not, the Black Lives Matter organization doesn't care about their black lives. They don't care about any black life. They don't care about any of the people that are systemically slaughtered in Chicago or Baltimore or Minneapolis. They only care when it's a black member of a community that's shot and killed by a cop. That's the only thing they're concerned about. That is an attack on the police. That's all they're focused on. They just want to diminish the police, defund the police, remove the police. That's what they're focusing on, because they want a revolution within government. And, you know, it makes it extremely difficult for the cops out there that are black.
On Tuesday, a community activist in Los Angeles said this about the members of his community who were condoning this violence against police. Listen.
Condemn the shooting of both deputies in the strongest terms. The activists who were here protesting outside the emergency room, saying and chanting, "We hope they die, we hope they die, we hope they die." We're here to say, we hope they live, we hope they live, we hope they live. Because those activists, they don't represent our community, our movement, our struggle for justice. They represent the worst in humanity. They are an embarrassment, and they should be ashamed of themselves.
Bernie Kerik, what role do these churches and community activists and community organizations have in these neighborhoods and areas like Compton to help maintain a sense of law and order? And what should these leaders in the community be doing to institute respect for cops?
You know what, Ray? What you just heard is somebody that's a real community leader in that community. That's who that person is. 90 to 95% are the people that are real community leaders. They really live in those communities. They want to see more cops. They want more pro-policing by the cops. They want to reduce the violence, the shootings, the homicides in their communities. The people that were at that hospital, I can promise you, most of them were not from that community. They're anarchists that are brought in from other places to start trouble, get involved in riots, attacks, arson, things like that. But what you just heard, I would say that's 90 to 95% of the real communities and community leaders. Look for all the help they can get, and all these other lunatics are coming in, being paid, you know, Soros funded. That's where they come from.
The city of Rochester, New York, Bernie, has seen protests for 2 weeks after accusations of a cover-up emerged stemming from the arrest of Daniel Prude. Now, the police released body cam footage, and it showed the officers covering Prude's head with a spit hood and holding him down. Prude was put on life support and died a few days after his arrest. In the meantime, protesters have been making demands for the mayor's resignation, as well as a few other leaders. A couple of these demonstrations have turned violent, and last week, Mayor Warren suggested that as a way to deal with the escalation between protesters and police, they should do this.
I have spoken with Chief Singletary, and we have discussed at length how our police department has responded to the protesters. The deployment of pepper balls, tear gas, the fireworks, and agitators have escalated these situations. Pastor Brown and I are calling on the elders of this city and our community to meet at her church. They will stand as the buffer between our protesters and our police department.
What do you make of the suggestion to use elders as the buffer between protesters and police, Bernie? Is that a good idea?
It's stupidity. You're going to get somebody killed. Ray, listen, here's the bottom line. For the last 20 to 30 years, community activists, community leaders, people within the Department of Justice have pushed for the policing in this country to do everything in their power to have non-lethal weapons, to do everything in their power to make sure that deadly physical force was the last resort. So today, what are we hearing from the Democrats? No more chemical agents, no more mace, no more batons, no more tasers, no more pepper ball. Okay, now you're going to take all the stuff back that we've given the cops so they don't have to use deadly force. What are they going to do when they're being attacked? What are they going to do when somebody in the community is being attacked? When they have their hands and feet, maybe a baton and a gun. That's all they can use. Now we're going back to where we were 30 years ago. This is sheer stupidity. Number one, to take it away. And number two, say, we're going to put a bunch of elderly people between those protesters or those rioters and anarchists and the cops.
Wow. No, I agree. It's a dangerous situation, and I pray it doesn't end in bloodshed. The mayor of Rochester, Bernie, abruptly fired the police chief this week, 2 weeks before he was to step down and retire due to the lack of transparency in this case. But we've seen over a dozen police chiefs step down throughout the country after the death of George Floyd. Not all of these departures have been due to bad policing. Seattle Police Chief Carmen Best left because the city council voted to cut her pay and cut $4 million from the police budget. What becomes of the communities and the departments they leave behind?
Well, listen, in Rochester, you not only had the chief, before he was terminated by the mayor, which was a political move, he had already resigned. His executive staff, his deputy, other executives at the executive level resigned, retired. They were leaving. They were leaving because of poor management, executive leadership by the mayor, the city council. That's why they were leaving. That's why these other chiefs are leaving. Nobody wants to put their job, their department, the people under their command, nobody wants to put them in jeopardy. So you either stay, if you're going to stay on the job, tell the mayor, give me the resources I need to do the job, get out of my way and let me do the job. If you're not going to do that, then you know what? I've got to go. And that's what's happening.
Yeah. Bernie, you were 30 years in law enforcement. Do you support AG William Barr's reported idea to charge these rioters and the instigators here who've attacked police, destroyed property, to charge them and prosecute them with sedition? Is that appropriate?
I think, yeah. First of all, I fully support the Attorney General's efforts to go after these people, to the fullest extent of the law. And where they can charge them with federal crimes, where they're coming in from other states, where they're committing arson, riot, where they're involved in Antifa and Black Lives Matter as a coordinated effort, because keep in mind, they're using threats, intimidation, and violence for political reasons. That is terrorism. I think they should be charged with it, and they should be held accountable at a federal level, and then that stuff will stop. You're not going to stop it when you're charging them with state laws and they're in and out of the system within hours. You're not going to stop anything.
Bernie Kerik, thank you as always for being here and for your insight.
Ray, thank you.